Welcome to DeathWatch, the Star Wars podcast from a galaxy not so far, far away. I'm Mike Bennett.
And I'm Chris Skull.
And today we'll be discussing our favorite Star Wars animated series, Rebels.
So Rebels was created, it was directed, and it was written by our man Dave Filoni, along with Simon Kinberg and Carrie Beck. And Rebels is, if we can compare it in terms of work, George Lucas first created the Clone Wars series back in 2008. Dave Filoni was on board as one of the writers and directors, and he was very much like the Jedi ways. George Lucas was training Dave Filoni almost like his own Padawan. Star Wars Rebels is, if we can compare it, Clone Wars was with the training wheels on. Rebels is with the training wheels totally off.
The Mandalorian is when he switches over to a dirt bike and starts doing backflips off of ramps.
I mean, it's crazy. But on the note of the Mandalorian, there's definitely a lot of tie-ins that, if you're a fan of that show, we were talking about the Mandalorian in the beginning of this podcast. There are tie-ins to what we see in the Mandalorian, dating back all the way to what we saw in Rebels. So today we want to talk about it. How great of a show is it? If you're not familiar with it, we highly recommend that you watch the series. So we're going to go a little bit more into it today.
Yeah. And I just started to watch the series with my kids. We're kind of pacing it and not trying to binge all 4 seasons in
Don't do what,
like a couple
what we
days.
Did.
Yeah. But watching it a couple of episodes at a time. And it's great because at surface level, it looks like a cartoon show. But any of you who have watched Clone Wars or Rebels recognize that it's much more than just a kid series. But it works on both levels, on an adult long-term Star Wars fan level, as well as kids and new fans to the franchise. So why don't we jump in and start with just kind of an overview of the series, who, what, where, when, why. Yeah. So the Rebels series starts after Clone Wars, after the Republic has fallen, after Order 66, the galaxy is destitute of Jedi. It's fallen under the crushing rule of the Empire, and this series catalogs one specific rebel cell and how they developed from their early days as kind of like smugglers and working outside of the law, but to help, kind of like in a Robin Hood kind of way, help the people who are being oppressed, and how they eventually merged with other groups and built the beginnings of the rebellion. And it kind of leads into the Rogue One movie, and then eventually the original trilogy.
So in terms of timeline, this is 5 years before A New Hope. So 5 years before Luke Skywalker ventures onto his journey. 14 years after the beginning of the Galactic Empire. Mm-hmm. So this is all told from the perspective of several main characters, but more specifically, it's I guess you can argue that this is really the story of another young Jedi, Ezra Bridger, who was born right as all this, in terms of the Galactic Empire starting.
Yeah, I mean,
all that was happening.
His birthday is actually Empire Day, which is the founding of the Empire, and there's, I think, a definite like narrative connection to that mm-hmm. He was born at the moment that evil was. I think he represents, his last name is Bridger. He's a bridging of the old Jedi Order to what becomes the new Jedi Order through Luke Skywalker later. There's just a ton of deep, subtle things built into the stories here. And like you said, it follows a group, and I think Ezra feels kind of like the main character, but they all have their, like any good series, they all have their own breakouts and storylines. It's a crew of a ship called the Ghost, which is owned and run by Hera Syndulla. She's a Twi'lek pilot, and really probably the best. Maybe eventually Poe Dameron could maybe top her skills. It's hard to tell what you're supposed to believe about Poe Dameron, but she is an incredible pilot, very skilled at what she does. But this specific ship is a freighter type ship in the class of like the Millennium Falcon, and has a lot of unique features that allow it to disappear from scopes and re-scramble its signature so it doesn't get easily found when it pops into new systems. And
Yeah.
she
It kind of
runs
reminds me of the Razor Crest.
Yeah,
How the Razor
yeah.
Crest is like an older model, and it's got all these codes, and it's pre-imperial, I
Right.
think is what they designate it as. So it's got some tricks up its sleeve to be able to hide around and stash where needed.
Yeah, and the character, like all of the good ships in Star Wars, it becomes a character in and of itself, not just a vehicle for the characters, but a vehicle for the story. And
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I love the I forget what it's called, the little shuttle on the back. It's called the Spectre.
Oh, the Phantom.
Phantom. Yeah, all these. So the ship's called the Ghost. All of them referred to each other in the code name of Spectre. The Phantom is all of these, past life living as though they were dead type names. But her crew is, she has Kanan Jarrus, who is a former / current Jedi. He was a Padawan during the Purge, and his master sort of sacrificed herself to save him. There's a lot of emotional connections and thinking there. He kind of lives under the radar, but eventually takes on Ezra as a Padawan, who the group primarily operates on the planet Lothal, which is a new planet to the world, or to the galaxy from our perspective, but becomes the central location where they operate. There's an Imperial base there. They manufacture fighters primarily, and eventually develop new levels of fighters there, like the TIE Defender, which was one of my favorites from back in the day. It has the 3-wing with the points, or I guess 4 wings, but it was really when we played Rogue Squadron, it was impossible to shoot down. Really maneuverable. And then a couple others. Sabine Wren is a Mandalorian, and she has her own conflicted past, but she's in this group. And also, Zeb Aurelius, they call him Zeb.
Garazeb, yeah, Garazeb Aurelios.
Aurelios, that's it. He's I'm blanking.
Lasat.
Well, Lasat,
Yeah.
Which is kind of like an ape-like species, almost like a small Wookiee for what it's worth.
So a funny thing about that is the character, or the species character design, was based off of early Ralph McQuarrie sketches for what Chewbacca was supposed to look like.
Oh, that's cool.
Before he had the more, the hairier disposition, I guess.
Yeah.
So there, you'll see early sketches from way back, and it looks exactly like what Zeb looks like now. And they kind of quip in one episode. Some stormtroopers, they're trying to. I think there's one episode where they're trying to sneak in, and they disguise, or they pretend.
They're trying
Zeb
to
is a
free Wookiees, and they're like, "We've brought another one."
And he goes, and they look at him as like, "That's not a Wookiee." Like, what? You've never seen a hairless Wookiee before? So
yeah,
that's kind of our play on that concept. He's a completely different species, but it's based off of the early concept of what Wookiees were supposed to look like.
Yeah.
He has an interesting backstory too, because when you see him first, he's sort of like he's the muscle, the typical muscle in any heist group, but in reality, he actually has a more. He was what they called an honor guardsman of his species, and when his species were attacked, he was supposed to be the last line of defense for the royal family, or something like that, and obviously he failed. Mm-hmm. So there's some episodes where he has that conflict in himself. Like, he doesn't have what it takes, but he still tries, for the greater good.
Yeah. Well, and there's a connection with him and the early seasons villain, who's an Imperial service in ISB. Imperial what?
He's basically
ISB.
Space CIA.
Yeah. It's
same
division that
Moff
Moff Gideon is in.
Yeah.
And that's Agent Callus, and he was involved in the elimination of his entire species when they destroyed Lasat and all of the people. And he has that cool, his weapon is it's a shock stick that looks a lot like the droids that protect General Grievous. They have like the purple, and they spin them around, and they get like 40 seconds of screen time at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith before Obi-Wan and Anakin cut them to pieces, and they crash land the cruiser on Coruscant. But it looks similar, and that has like the two plasma torches at the end, and they kind of fight sort of like lightsabers.
But he can collapse it, and then it doubles as a rifle.
Right. It's an interesting dual purpose weapon. And then any good crew has a droid in tow, and this one has just as much, if not more, attitude than R2D2, who is our favorite all along. But Chopper, whose call sign is C1-10P. So if you look at C1-10P, so if you look at the way C1 and the dash, and it looks like chop, and so they just call him Chopper. He's Hera's droid from forever ago. Actually, interestingly, salvaged him from a crashed Y-wing from the Clone Wars on her home planet, which is one of the few planets that have blurg on them also. Just to link it back to Mandalore again. So she's had that droid since she was a kid, and he's a bit smaller than R2. He's an astromech droid, but has a lot of like sassy personality, and like even like wobbles. Like R2's like beeping is sassy, but Chopper actually, like, he has like, I don't know, gimbals in his leg and in his like headpiece that like he wobbles, and he's like sassing you.
I love the way that when he talks, which by the way, the voice credit for Chopper is Dave Filoni, I think.
Yeah, it is.
So, and he has a very distinct way. He doesn't, like you said, he doesn't beep and whistle like R2. He goes,
he sounds like grumbling. The adults from Charlie Brown.
Right.
But he's
probably my favorite, definitely top 3, but he's probably my favorite droid in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, he's great. And Chris sells brew buddies that you put over your straws, and he's got a Chopper brew buddy, which I love.
He's got his little. He's the only droid that I've seen that makes good use of his little claws. Like,
he has like crab claw utility hands, which are cool. Like R2 just has a bunch of like got these little interface sticks, but
prods and stuff. But Chopper knows how he's like spins around. He can slap people with them. So
picks stuff up and throws it. He's very versatile. So this crew is, they're all together like this. The opening to the series is them on Lothal stealing some stuff from the Empire to, buy or sell to the poor, or sell it and give the money to the poor. And during this heist, they run into this kid who is himself very good at stealing and surviving, sees that they're doing something and jumps in the middle of it and steals some of their loot. And Kanan, like we said, the former Jedi, or Jedi in hiding, sees something special about this kid and offers to bring them on board. And so much of this series is about sacrificing for the greater good, and how like your own self-interest doesn't matter in the comparison to everything else in the galaxy. It's, I think, why the rebellion in the early days survived, because if they were just prioritizing yourself, you would have given up a long time ago. And so there's some really, hard storylines where they have to make big sacrifices.
There's some, if you could compare it, the character of Ezra when he was first introduced is very like street rat. He's kind of like Space Aladdin. And but if Aladdin,
I'm looking for trying to think who Abu is. I guess it's Chopper, but
begrudgingly, yes. I think I feel like they have the same dynamic.
Yeah.
But then it's like Aladdin meets the A-Team, and then they join together, and they're trying
running around in the underground of Los Angeles.
yeah, essentially Space Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Like you said, it does go into like some rough
Los Angeles.
Okay, I gotcha. That was good. Like the storylines get pretty interesting. They do touch certain certain topics, like things related to loyalty and loss, but then also try to make things a little bit more lighthearted. So like the crew of the Ghost becomes a family. You know, at the beginning, there's always that, you know, those growing pains, especially when you begrudgingly are with people that you may not necessarily want to be with. And at the end of it, it's more than just coming together as a team. Like, they really do treat each other as brothers and sisters. And then the dynamic between Kanan and Hera becomes like a mother-father relationship to the rest of the crew.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an aspect of the series, is the aspect of family. And for all of the members who seem to have been had their family taken away from them, they, you know, build their own families in each other. It's a cool storyline. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's cool about the series is you get to see like the nitty gritty of training a young Padawan in the Jedi, or in the ways of the Jedi, in Ezra, and the relationship with his master and Kanan. You know, in the movies and other things, we kind of see a little bit of it with Ahsoka and Clone Wars, but by the time she joins the series, she's already a trained youngling. She's like learned to connect with the Force, and she's really learning some like field experience. Ezra doesn't know what the Force is at the beginning of this series, and over a grueling training process and experiences in honestly a very non-ideal situation, learns to connect with the Force, and eventually learns to become a Jedi, embraces that life of self-sacrifice and taking care of others. I think it's, you know, what's also interesting is Kanan is not, he also struggles being a master and not feeling like he's good enough, knowing that like his training was sort of cut short, and he's dealing with half a bag of experience, and having to do what he can to help Ezra.
He also has like these reservations because he knows that he's setting him up for potentially to die, because they know. And then there is the arc where the Inquisitors are introduced. Their job is literally to hunt Jedi. Mm-hmm. So it's actually
the opening scene to the series is Darth Vader speaking to the Grand Inquisitor, and saying, you need to hunt down the Jedi. And then we cut to Lothal and meet the rebels. But from the beginning, it's about the fact that there are only a few Jedi left, and they're all being hunted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his role as a mentor, which it took some convincing from Hera to train him, to convince him to train Ezra. But he's scared that he's going to lose him just as much as Kanan lost his mentor, his Jedi Master. So it does touch on, kind of going back to what we said, it's more than just a cartoon show. It's more of a show that's lighthearted, but also has more serious tones, but veiled as an animated series. Mm-hmm. And in essence, that's kind of what Star Wars is as a whole. Like, you got action, and you got, you know, Jedi battles and starship battles, and like, you know, those things are the definitely cooler parts about Star Wars. But there's always those stories underneath.
Yeah, they veil morals. A broader theme.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's like these little lessons for you on how to improve your life and the lives of the people around you.
Yeah, one of my favorite jokes from the series in the early days of training Ezra, and you to clearly see that Kanan struggles to grasp all of what it means to be a Jedi Master, is when like Ezra's doing like the handstand thing, trying to connect with the Force, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna try, and he's like, no, don't try, there is no try, just do or do not. And he's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. He's like, yeah, I never really got it either, but Master Yoda said it all the time. And I just love that they, like, you know, pointed out, yeah, that's something that's super weird from the original trilogy, and everyone just accepts it as normal. But yeah, we get that it doesn't make sense either.
Yeah.
All right, well, why don't we take a quick break, give you a chance to hear from our sponsors. Let's see, I need a pithy, give you a chance to do listen to our sponsors and not try to listen to our sponsors, and we'll be right back. And we're back. So, Chris, I want to ask you first, who's your favorite character from Rebels?
Um, I didn't like. I'll say who was my least favorite. Ezra in the very beginning, and I think up through actually pretty much the entirety of the series, I didn't like Ezra. I think that's sort of the point. He was very immature. I mean, he was a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid, growing up through all these things, and he basically grew up an orphan. And he's got a lot of put on his shoulders, so he's gonna act out.
Yeah.
So I think that they wrote it to the best of their abilities. I actually liked Hera, and she had an interesting arc also in the later series because she's a strong character, but every strong character has their weaknesses, and because she's the very motherly type, family is very important for her. So that arc when she has to go back home and she sees her dad and she meets up with her dad again, sort of old memories come back, and it sort of redefines what the definition of family is. Like, family can be blood, but family can also be the people that you align yourselves with and who you have your loyalties with. I think though it's sort of a split in terms of other favorite character is between Sabine and Chopper. Sabine had a lot of personality. She was very she had a lot of creativity. She wasn't afraid of being herself. She did what she can to protect others without compromising her own qualities.
Yeah.
Chopper is just chaotic evil. And sometimes sometimes you just want stuff, you just need stuff to blow up, and Chopper's your droid.
Yeah. And Sabine is actually a former member of the holder of the Darksaber, as we find out in one of the story arcs.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to go back and watch it. But she's like the loophole for me of why Mando can't just hand Bo-Katan the Darksaber.
We still don't understand, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we still don't know. We can theorize, but at the end of the day, it's whatever Filoni wants.
Sure.
So we just have to just wait and see.
Yeah.
What about you?
You're gonna not like this, but no, I'm just kidding. Actually, my favorite character from the series is Kanan, because I think he takes on begrudgingly the role of training another generation of Jedi in a way like he knows in order for them to continue, they have to be trained, and understanding even if he's not the best person to do it, he's the only person to do it, and so he's going to have to do it.
Right.
And a lot of the series, you can see his continued struggle with having to be a teacher and take on that burden, but he does it. And being a Jedi in this period is like so much more than just having a target on you. Like, it becomes the full focus of the Empire in the area, trying to just take him out, which is one, dangerous for him, but two, dangerous for those around him, who he loves the most and has to continually protect. So, and then later in the series, he experiences hardship and presses through it and kind of shows the Force in a different way than we've seen Jedi use, which I think is really cool. And even the whole arc with the Bendu, it gets kind of like the Clone Wars arc where Yoda goes to learn about, manifesting yourself in the Force after death kind of thing. It gets really deep into what the Force could be, in ways that I feel like Kanan would have like been a good apprentice to Qui-Gon and like learning the sort of fringe elements of the Force.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's great.
Yeah, that it also goes into, and I'm glad you mentioned that because there's also different story arcs that we also saw in the Clone Wars regarding the Force that sort of make a reappearance in Rebels, specifically story arcs about the brother, the sister, the father.
Yeah, Mortis.
You have like those different personifications of the Force, and kind of kind of like Han Solo. That's not how the Force works. It's not for you to determine how the Force works. It just is. Like,
right.
People use it for positive outlets and people use it for negative outlets, but like the Bendu, he was speaking in riddles, but in reality he was just saying the Force is the Force. It just is.
Yeah.
And people are going to use it however they want.
Right.
There also was a reappearance of more Force sensitive creatures, kind of like the Loth Wolf, I think is what they call them.
Yep.
Which, something that bothers me about the nomenclature of the xenobiology in Star Wars.
It gets tough when every animal has to have the first half of the planet's name.
Loth Cat, Loth Wolf, Loth Bat.
Yeah.
Loth Monkey.
It's an Earth Dog, an Earth Cat, an Earth Bird.
See how silly that sounds?
An Earth
Sounds
blurg.
pretty silly.
It does sound silly.
Earth Cat.
Like a Loth Cat would have been fine if they just stopped there, but
yeah,
they had to keep going.
Yeah.
No, those are interesting. And even we see some of Ezra has the ability to speak with animals through the Force or connect with them more deeply, which we've seen occasionally from other Jedi. But it's just an interesting exploration of that as well.
Yeah. And specifically, and this ties into the quote unquote demise, or rather unknown future for Ezra, how you can communicate with the Purgle.
Yeah. When the series ends with Ezra asking the Purgle to jump into hyperspace with the evil character of the series, or at least the end of the series, Admiral Thrawn, and take him to wherever, they'd sort of just disappear. I think I like season 4.5 Ezra, like the end, like the second half, because he ends up that he gets less whiny and more mature.
Yeah, he finally gets what he has to do.
Yeah, like he legit becomes a Jedi as opposed to like a Padawan or like a youngling. And so that's why I almost said Ezra is my favorite character, because I do like him so much near the end. And I think it would be great if he's able to make an appearance in the Ahsoka series, which kind of feels possible.
Right.
You mentioned the Clone Wars arcs that kind of carry over here. The arc about Mortis and the son and the father and the brother, the daughter, the brother, and the son, the father. They show up in some artwork that ends up being some connection to a portal to another world, which is the world between worlds. It's a connection back to Ahsoka in some ways, because earlier in the series Ahsoka shows up. She takes on the codename Fulcrum and passing along information between rebel cells. But there's this deep connection between her story, how it continues from Rebels into the future, and a big reason of why she ends up in the Mandalorian is related to this world, and I think it's hinted at in the Ahsoka show artwork. The kind of like histographics that are on there seem very reminiscent of that world as well. So there's a cool connection there. Speaking of kind of the evil parts of this show, like I said, episode 1 opens with Darth Vader speaking to the Inquisitor. We know the Inquisitors from this show.
Grand Inquisitor.
The Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
They make reappearances in the video game Fallen Order, but they're basically like what?
The helicopter blades. We have to talk about the helicopter lightsabers.
I don't love that they can fly with them, because there are, we obviously have to suspend what our understanding of physics is for several other components of the show, but spinning a blade of light, not even a blade, like it's a stick of a baton of light, doesn't seem like You're going to be able to get any lift out of that.
It's been, yeah, I mean, come on, guys. Physics is still a thing.
It feels very Mary Poppins-y.
Leia Poppins.
I think it is cool that like Mary Poppins pulls the umbrella out and floats away.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I remember seeing somebody on TikTok, he's pretending to be Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and they're like sort of like in a creative group. And Jon Favreau was like, okay, guys, we need ideas for season 3 of The Mandalorian. And then like Dave Filoni's like raising his hand like, Dave, we've talked about this, man. I know what you're going to say, but nope, we can't do it. Helicopter lightsabers. We don't have the budget for that.
They are cool. The double-bladed lightsaber with the rotating hilt as a combat tool. Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's like basically building in General Grievous's combat style into the hilt. But
if you play Fallen Order, and then towards the end, the last boss is an Inquisitor, it makes sense when they're kind of doing the Darth Sidious evil spin shriek that we saw in Revenge of the Sith, where they kind of like lunge.
Yeah, and he's so quickly kills lightsaber. Kit Fisto and 3 other Grand Jedi members of the Council in 1 second with no
whatever. So the Inquisitor does a similar move with the double-bladed, spinning lightsaber. So in that regard, it kind of makes sense because you're using the Force to propel yourself, and then it's just a tool to attack you. But
yeah,
the means in which they use it as a mode of transport.
Yeah. I'm not here for it.
No, not in the least bit. But anyway, it was interesting to see that they did that. They introduced some. The Inquisitors, I think, were all listed in the graphic novels. You saw some Inquisitors that were dispatched in Rebels. You see other Inquisitors that were also dispatched in Fallen Order. Grand Inquisitor also makes his demise. Interesting is something that they explained in Rebels is that all the Inquisitors were former Jedi. Mm-hmm. Not the least of the Grand Inquisitor actually being a temple guard, which is one of the highest honors a Jedi could have. And then that said Inquisitor appears to Kanan Jarrus later on, like I think in season 3 or season 4, more towards the end, and I guess has returned to the light side of the Force, or this is some sort of Force vision. So a version of him is speaking to Kanan Jarrus and it's like, hey buddy, you got this. Keep it up. You gotta train the kid. So they have these different elements of that parts of the Star Wars universe that call all the way back to the prequels that we're seeing again in this version.
Yeah. We so we have these Inquisitors who we said are like kind of fallen Jedi who get tasked by Darth Vader to seek out the remaining remnant of the Jedi. Darth Vader himself makes a few appearances. He's used sporadically the same way he was in the original trilogy. Like you see him for moments, he's super bad and you're like afraid of him showing up at any moment, but he doesn't have very many on-screen moments. The few that he does are significant, but he's there. We get to see Darth Maul again, which is cool. It bridges. Let's see. I guess this is probably. Well, we see a lot of how he. He's ruling Mandalore in this. Yeah. In this series, yeah, it's not in Clone Wars. And it's just
no. Actually,
it is in Clone Wars.
It's in Clone Wars where he does, because at the end of it, Ahsoka is, arrests him or whatever. It's in Rebels where he's sort of like raggedy.
Yeah, he's deranged.
He's very old. At this point, he's old.
Yeah.
And
I feel like him and Kenobi are almost like dyads in the Force, it comes up later, but like they're opposite each other in all of their significant moments. They represent like the carrying forward of the torch for both sides of the Force. And Obi-Wan is in this series, and they together make an appearance, and it's like I love that episode, and the almost they've been each other's adversary for almost their entire lives, and they have this like relationship with each other and almost respect and reverence for each other, even
Definitely
through
not
their
frenemies.
no, even through their hatred for each other. It's like I hate you so much that I know you so well, and I hate you, and I respect you. It's really cool.
His arc, the way that Maul first introduced himself, what we saw in the Clone Wars series was he's been trying to get back at the Sith for revenge.
Yeah.
So he introduces himself to Ezra. Ezra has no idea, rightfully so, who this old man is. He said, "Oh, I'm so old. I'm so frail. Oh, the Sith are evil. We gotta stop them." So he kind of sounds like a Jedi from Ezra's perspective, but in reality, he's just trying to trick him to get back at the Empire and make Ezra a new apprentice.
Yeah.
But those events end up leading Ezra to find Obi-Wan Kenobi because they need his help. He goes to Tatooine. He finds Obi-Wan. Maul follows Ezra. Maul finds Obi-Wan. And then they have their incredibly brief, but somehow very poetic, 1v1. And what I found very interesting was that Maul, he finds the end of Obi-Wan's blade in a very Kurosawa style, samurai showdown, and Obi-Wan like cradles him.
Yeah. Like in the same way that he cradles Satine when she dies in Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's very caring.
Mm-hmm.
And then
he looks at him. He goes, he's referring to Luke, the reason why Obi-Wan was there, and he says, "Is he the chosen one?"
Because he like even asks, he's like, "Why are you here?" And Obi-Wan doesn't say anything, but he sees it in his eyes of like he's not here to hide, he's here to protect. He's like, "Oh, you're protecting the future."
Yeah. And then Maul asks him, "Is he the chosen one?" And Obi-Wan, I don't remember if he actually.
He doesn't answer either, but like he Maul says knows. Yes in his eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Maul goes, "Well, then he will
revenge us.
He will avenge us," or something like that. Like all he really cared about was just ending the Sith. In Maul, in his own special way, that's all he wanted.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. You mentioned that they had that kind of relationship, and then Maul's dying words were, "Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, he's gonna do it," and that's all he wanted.
Yep. So our last two kind of big bads are at the beginning. This Agent Callus, who runs the ISB operating this sector of the galaxy, which is tasked with. It almost seems like a data analytics group who's like, we've seen higher instances of rebel activity here. We are searching to make sure rebel cells don't pop up because the Emperor has foreseen that those will start to happen and has tasked this ISB group with shutting down rebel cells and rebel activity.
Right.
And, eventually that activity on Lothal becomes it operated by Grand Admiral Thrawn, who we hear about later in the series. It's season 3 and season 4, and then we hear him name checked in the Mandalorian in the Jedi episode because Ahsoka is hunting for him, and it's kind of how we have this expectation that perhaps Ezra is still around because we believe that Grand Admiral Thrawn is still around, and they were last seen together.
Or at least Ahsoka believes that Grand Admiral Thrawn is around. But
true.
But there were Easter eggs, so to speak, in that one episode of The Mandalorian to suggest that he's alive, or at least he still has influence.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're actually gonna be talking about Grand Admiral Thrawn in a future episode. We'll go more in depth because we feel like he's gonna have a lot more involvement in the Star Wars universe, outside of his involvement in Rebels.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You also mentioned Callus. So his story was he was the antagonist, and then there's that episode where he and Zeb are stranded, and then Zeb begrudgingly helps him, and then that's sort of the start of his fall as an Imperial agent.
Right.
and his rise to assisting the rebels and their cause. And I've actually seen, it's all speculation at this point, but there's been some concept art for the Cassian Andor series where Cassian is fleeing on a speeder bike and he's got someone riding behind him shooting back at, presumably some Imperial forces. It's been speculated that that's Callus.
Oh.
Again, it's concept art. It could literally be anybody, or it could just be somebody's headcanon. But
Sure.
But what is confirmed is that Callus is alive towards the end of the Rebel series, just before New Hope. So there's that 5-year period where things occur in the Rebel Alliance, in which Cassian Andor takes place. So it's possible that with his resources and his skills as an ex-ISB agent, he helps the rebellion in more and more ways. So it's possible we'll see him again.
Yeah. So I think, like we've said before at the beginning, this series is our favorite of the animated series. It bridges such an interesting, period in between the trilogies, brings in new characters, and as Dave Filoni has made possible, sets up a lot of future storylines that even happen beyond the trilogy series, which are in between this and The Mandalorian. So if you haven't seen it, you absolutely should watch it. It's available on Disney Plus, and it's such a good series. It's when it was on television, I think it was rated TV 7 or whatever, PG-7. So like my kids are 6 and 8, and I feel that they can watch it. It's a great series to watch together. If you're an adult, go for it. It's a really good series.
Mm-hmm. So that's all for this episode. Before we close, we just want to mention that we've actually been doing some rebranding with our social media handles. We've been a little bit more engaging on both Instagram and TikTok, but we've also added some merch to our Etsy shop, including our new Pew Pew t-shirt, as well as, I think you put up a
hoodie.
A hoodie, yeah. So we got a Pew Pew t-shirt and hoodie. We still have our This Is the Way merch, which includes mugs, hoodies, t-shirts for adults and kids. We actually have a sale going on now. We were just part of a giveaway for my other shop, Skull Squared. We just hit 10K followers on Instagram, so we were participating with a bunch of other shops in offering store credit. So in light of that, and as a thanks to everybody who's been supporting our platform, supporting DeathWatch Podcast as well as Skull Squared, we're actually doing a sale between now and March 2nd. We're doing 10% off all merch. Just use the code 10K10OFF between now and March 2nd, and it's going to give you 10% off anything you want in the shop.
That's 10K10 off.
That's correct.
Until March 4th.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, just also follow us on Instagram and on TikTok, and I'm going to be mentioning that as well. Plus, stay tuned for other giveaways. I've been 3D printing some things for time-lapse content.
And building a Darksaber.
And I've been building the Darksaber. So, the Darksaber I'm keeping. That's mine.
Yeah,
that's going to be my baby. But I've been printing like Stormtroopers, and I got a project. I want to 3D print a small-scale Millennium Falcon. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to be hosting giveaways and giving that stuff to one of you loyal listeners in the future.
So if you like this episode, like as Chris said, please subscribe to the show, review us on Apple Podcasts. It's the best way for other people to find our show. You can also follow us on Instagram at DeathWatch Podcast, on Twitter at DeathWatchCast, and on TikTok at DeathWatchCast.
Thanks for listening. This is the way.
This is the way.